Wood Reed, welcome to Writers in a Relationship.
Hey, Gail, thank you for inviting me.
Yes. And this is a joint post with Hodgepodge Substack. I always forget to say that. It's not just Writers in Relationship. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other way. I was thinking about when we met, and I was like, "Oh, I think it was Cobalt." But anyway, I'm going to turn that over to you to tell that story.
Yeah, it was Cobalt, and I think it was 2020, I think. And you published my first piece, which was Man on the Moon. And I didn't know that you had taken, I set up a Substack, um, and then I mean, I'm sorry, not a Substack. I set up a submittable account, and then I changed my submittable account and I went back and looked at my old one, and you had accepted my piece on that account, but it had been like 2 months before. And I completely freaked out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get it published now. So I of course immediately emailed you, and that began our relationship. And our, yeah, and it was why I'm here today. So yes, that was a huge moment for me.
It was such a good story. I love that story so much. The character was can you tell us a little bit about that character in that story?
Um, it's a character. The character is a young woman, and at night she falls asleep and has these dreams. And and as dreams are, they're very fantastic, and things that could never happen. So of course she's flying, and she sort of flies around the planets, and she sees the moon, and she's hovering there, and there's a man on the moon, and he's sort of sitting there with his legs crossed, and he asks her to come over, but she doesn't. And a couple of times later, nights later, she does and sits with him, and it begins this relationship. And it's about love, and it's about loss, and knowing, losing something and not knowing what you had, before, and then you lose it, and then you realize. And so yeah, it was a special piece for me. And uh, yeah, but it's all fantasy. But the thing about it is, you don't really know if she is actually dreaming or if this is actually happening. And I wanted to make that sort of blur that line so the reader can interpret whatever they decide they want it to be.
I loved not knowing for sure. Like that was really fun for me as a reader. To
Actually, I don't know either, so that makes
That's
two.
great. Tell us where you are, and your setting, and how that does or doesn't influence your writing, and the larger context of your setting, and even just where you're set up.
I live in Los Angeles, and I'm in my house right now. My dog is Watson is behind me, so he may bark at any moment because there's a cat that he is his nemesis that always walks by the window. But I suppose my setting does influence me a little bit, because a lot of my pieces are, they're centered in places in Los Angeles. But for the most part, I think it's 50-50. I don't think it's either one or the other. Because I've lived in New York, and so I have pieces that are set in New York. I lived in San Francisco. So, but I'm a native Californian, so I'm back home now. So I don't really, it's a good question. And I thought about this when you sent me your questions in advance. And I don't know if it really influences me that much. It's more of an environment that makes it conducive for me to write because I feel so at home here, and comfortable. And it's always usually beautiful outside, unless we're having fires, or floods. But other than that, yeah, it's so yes, it does influence me in a bit, but mostly it's just the comfort I feel here. It makes it easy for me to write.
And you live in a very small house, don't you? Is it?
I live in a tiny house. It's well, it's technically 500 square feet, but there is the garage was converted into a guest house, so it's 600 square feet. So that extra 100 square feet really makes a difference. But I have a backyard, which is awesome, and yeah, but it's perfect. I love this house. I love how easy it is, and it's very comfortable too. And this house also makes it very conducive for me to write because it's just very cozy.
Yeah, I personally love small spaces, and I feel like I'm nesting if the space is small, like it's holding me in this very bird-like kind of way.
Oh, it's totally like that. Yeah, I prefer small spaces. When I lived in New York, I lived in a studio apartment with my then husband, and I think we had maybe 100 square feet, but it was awesome. It was great. And here, it's small, and I can manage it. And any thoughts of having any place bigger scare me because even the work that has to be done here is enough. And I think if I had anything bigger, if I lived in any bigger home, it would probably fall down around me because I wouldn't have the wherewithal to maintain it. So yeah.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with writing. You're a graphic designer by profession, and I'm curious how the writer aspect of your being and your artistic being kind of came into existence.
Well, I've been writing since I was about 10, and I wrote my first collection of short stories for an instructor of mine when I was in the seventh grade, which I found not that long ago, and it's actually not that bad. Um, which is just so funny to me. But so I've always been writing. I was an English major when I first started college, and but then I took one design class. My mother, who's an artist, encouraged me to take a class in design, and I am a person who cannot draw a straight line, and I thought, this is crazy. Why? And she kept saying, you should do this, you should do this. And so I got into this class, which was a miracle because at the the program I was at UCLA, and the program is very competitive. And I actually got in on a lottery. And that was this class. I took this class. It was color, and that was it. It just something clicked, and so I went on to pursue that while still maintaining my writing and um, but graphic design is my the profession where I actually make money. And it's like my day job. And then w just right, probably about 3 years before COVID, I'd always been taking writing classes, but I got into a class through extension. And it was awesome because it was 10 weeks, and each week we worked on a different genre. So the first week was picture book, the second week was like easy reader, third week middle school, fourth week young adult, and it went on like that. And that's what really got me started. And I had these great tools now. And so I continued taking these classes from this one instructor. And then I moved to a new class, which I am still in. I've been in for about 7 years. And then during COVID, I started, because we were all at home going crazy, I started sending my pieces out just to see what would happen. And then that's when you and I met. And so it's yeah, and so ever since then, I've always combined the two. I think writing is kind of a design-based thing as well, um, and design, is also lyrical. So uh, I think that they kind of are natural to, and I feel very fortunate to have both. And when I feel like I cannot design another thing and I'm so tired of it, I don't ever want to do it again, I have my writing. And when I feel like I can't write another word, I have design. So I feel very fortunate in that respect.
You said something really interesting that writing is a design-based practice. Like, I'm really curious about that. How do principles of design factor into the process of writing?
Because I think balance and I think there's a structure to writing and there's a structure to all graphic design. There's a grid, in design, and you break out of that grid to bring a life to whatever piece it is that a person is designing. And it's the same with writing. I think there's this structure and a kind of a grid in my mind of, how I want this story to progress. But then I also want to break out of that because that's what brings interest to a story. And so, but then there's also balance. You have to balance the beginning with the end and, uh, sort of bring it full circle. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much how I feel about that.
Do you find, because I'm somebody who I don't have artistic training, but I find myself very sensitive to aesthetics, and I pick up on things like, and something that I see a lot in design, or I'm not seeing a lot in contemporary design, is the integration of blank space or just sort of nothingness. And I'm wondering, is that something you play with in your writing? Whether it's silence or quiet or less, just the concept of having spaciousness.
I think that all writing has to have spaciousness. I mean, sometimes it's very dense, but even in that denseness, there's space because otherwise it's too hard. It's too hard to digest. Um, I understand what you say about, you appreciate design, you see it. I see it everywhere. In fact, it's kind of a blessing and a curse because I am constantly redesigning things in my head. And, oh, that could be so much better like that. And it just keeps going. And it's the same with writing as well. I don't think I'm ever satisfied with a piece. I go back, even if it's when it's been published, especially when it's been published and I can't do anything about it anymore. I go back and I think, oh, why didn't I should have done this. That's so obvious. But as far as like, I think I would interpret blank spaces as breathing room and giving the reader a chance to absorb and maybe relate to the piece as well. And so I think that is very, if that's the interpretation, I think that that's very important because you want the reader to relate in some aspect, whether they've never experienced this thing before, but they can empathize, or whether they have experienced and they're totally absorbed in the piece. If they have that opportunity to do that, I think it's very important.
Well, and in a way, that's a relationship thing too, because when you're crafting something, you're part of what you have in mind is what is this other person's experience going to be?
Right. I think that there's whenever I write something, well, first of all, before I start a piece, I have the first line. And if I can come up with my first sentence, then I'm off to the races. Like, and I'm happy with that sentence. Because I think the first sentence of any piece is the most important sentence uh, of all. And if the reader is intrigued by that, then you've got them. They're hooked and they want to know more. And I think, and so, and then if they can relate, I think for me, my pieces, I really reach out to the reader for them to relate to this because I think we all are part of this human experience. And a lot of people experience things that they think nobody else does. Oh, I'm the only one that has gone through this, or I'm the only one that's reacted to this thing like this. What's wrong with me? And I think it's important for people to know that everybody is in the same boat and everybody has had stuff happen and have reacted in certain ways, and they're not alone. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, I mean, and that to me is a very relational approach. And I
yeah.
think that is something that reading does give us in this very quiet way, right? The fact that we're not alone. We don't have to be in a group of a bunch of, in a room with a bunch of people. We're in our book, we're in our story, and we're connected, right?
Yeah, I think many times when you're in a room with a bunch of people, you feel more alone than ever because here you are surrounded by all these people, but you feel sort of isolated. At least I do. I mean, not all the time, but there are times when I feel isolated, like I'm here and I'm not really connecting, or why am I here? Why did they choose me? I don't belong here. That kind of stuff. So yeah, I think with reading, it's very intimate, and it's a real intimacy between the writer and the reader, and there's a relationship that happens, in that space, and it's important, and it's something I take very seriously.
And I feel that in your writing. And that's one of the things I love about your writing, that I feel very respected and cared for. And and I that's like how do you make that happen? Like I don't know. There's a little bit of mystery to that, right?
Oh, I love that you feel that way. I don't, I mean, I think that because I have that in mind when I'm writing, and I it's kind of funny. I recently, there was this online, it was like a personality test, and it was through, I think it was through Harvard. I can't remember, it doesn't matter. But I went through, I thought, oh, I'm just going to try this. Well, I scored like 100% in empathy, which is crazy. And so perhaps that's part of it too. It's like I'm just, I've got this uber empathy gene that comes out, when I'm writing. But I also know that I've experienced a lot of things, and I have felt alone, at times in those instances. And I think that I want people to know that we all go through this stuff, and we've all felt certain ways that may be disturbing at times, or distressful. But I think when you know that you're not the only one that's been through that or felt that way, it helps. And so I think that's always at the back of my mind when I'm writing a piece.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Shifting gears a little bit, I'm curious about your experience as an editor, and I'm always like sort of hungering for like, but what makes a good relationship between a writer and an editor? And I'm curious about how, like, what you've learned being an editor with Hodgepodge about the writer-editor relationship.
Well, first of all, I've learned that everybody has a different writing style, of course. And I also, but I feel like there's the most important thing is to have a connection with whomever it is you're editing. So before I edit a piece, I reach out to the writer and I ask them if they'd like to have like a FaceTime or a Zoom call, or would they like to talk on the phone before I start. And I usually read their piece at least twice before I speak with them or communicate with them. And when that writer does want to connect with me, it's the best because we all of a sudden start this relationship, and then they feel like they can trust me, maybe based on our conversation, which I think is so important. And the thing I struggle with editing is I have a very definite viewpoint of how something should, it's like this is a perfect correlation with design. I can look at something and know it's not right, that one little thing needs to change, whatever it is in a design context, like graphic design. And it's the same with writing. When I read a piece, um, I'll feel what's not working or what could just be sort of massaged a little bit to make it smoother or to so that the writer's intent is more clear. And so I balance, it's hard for me to balance with saying to the writer, hey, this area is not working, and just letting them do it and not doing it myself. And I've learned to back off with that and just let them, and after a while, if they're still having struggling with it, I'll say, I might do it this way, so that then they can see what I'm thinking. Um, but yeah, and I am so honored when that writer trusts me with their work because it's so personal. And here you are, you're sort of putting your beating heart on a plate and handing it to this person you don't really know, and they're going to read through your piece, and it's always that thing of, oh, this is no good. Why did I even submit it? Kind of a thing. So I try to be very respectful of that too. That if a piece needs a lot of editing, I try to frame it in a way that the writer still feels confident that their piece is can be worked, can be working, can work better, and not be defeated by it. Because that's hard too, it's hard to hear that as a writer, and it's also hard for the editor to frame it in a way that the writer can actually absorb it, take it in, and want to work forward, work the piece through without wanting to give up on it. So, and there are some pieces that need so little work that, there isn't that much to be done. There's some pieces, and I've worked with a writer who was awesome because the piece needed a lot of work. And that writer was so amenable to listening to both you and I, because you worked on the piece as well. And I was willing to go to the end of the earth for this writer to make sure that her piece was in the journal because she had been so willing to work with us. And so anyway, so there's that as well.
That openness I find is very exciting.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
totally.
the openness on both like if I'm a writer and an editor is very open, if an editor and the writer, like the openness, it's like it leaves a space for this sort of creative magic to happen.
Well, I think that that's also when you accepted my first piece so many years ago, you worked with me on it. I hadn't, well, first of all, I mean, by the time I knew that you had accepted my piece, I had other pieces had been accepted by other journals. And so, but no one on in the that were on any of those journals had actually worked with me as an editor. They most of them just published it, and I go back and I read those and I think, oh my gosh, this is so glaring. This should have happened. That, and you were the first person that really went through the piece and edited it so smartly and made it so much better. And I so appreciated that. And so I think that that's the thing too, is that, it's really hard when when you write something, you're in it. It's hard to see outside. And, there's all this emotion that goes into it. And it's very personal. And so sometimes, and I know for myself, even I'll write something and I have this thing in my mind but I don't explain it sometimes. And so the editor will read it and say, hey, this isn't, I don't, I'm confused by this. And I'll be like, what are you talking about? Of course, it's what happened to me when blah, blah, blah. Well, the editor doesn't know that. The potential readers don't know that. And so that to me is just like, that I am so appreciate because it just makes the piece so much better. And it's another set of eyes that's not connected to the piece at all. They're not looking at it through my eyes. And I think that is the importance of editing. I mean, aside from grammatical instances, which I am terrible with, by the way, as far as commas and the such, as you well know. But as far as just the piece itself, calling out areas that might not be working, that's not clear to the writer because they're in it. That's that's them. It's coming from them, and so that's why with the editing, it's just so important, and it's also important again to create that relationship and try to get that writer to trust your suggestions.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us a little bit about your story for Hodgepodge 4.2. I love the story so much.
The Sam Sparrow or
Yeah, Sam Sparrow.
I just oh, well, okay. So typically, like the last story I wrote, which was 4.1, The Road Home, it's about this guy waiting to die. Before that, I mean, it was, I mean, a number of my pieces are very can be dark. And the artist that we have featured in this issue, all of her artwork is incredible, and it's all tapestry. I mean, it's incredible, and they look like painted pieces, but really it's thread. And I saw this one of this cat in a tree and this bird flying off, and it looks as if the cat's letting the bird go. And I had just read for the third time the Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler. He's one of my favorite Los Angeles-based authors. And I just had this image of this cat, as this main character who is a film noir private eye. And I used all as I threw in as much of the genre as I possibly could. And I had fun with it, and it was like sort of a nice departure to just have something that's fun to read instead of something that's sort of contemplative and like, makes you feel like, oh my God. So, yeah, so that was it just again, I'm always thinking about what I want to write, but I'm not consciously thinking about it. So I hike a lot, and many times when I'm on these hikes, I'll go for like 6 or 7 miles, and it'll come to me as I'm hiking, like the line or the idea or whatever, and I'm like, that's it, and then I can write it. So that's kind of what happened with this piece too. But I really had fun with it. I
I
even
I laughed literally out like I wanted to write in the margins. I laughed out loud, like by myself at home in my apartment. I laughed. Like it's so, so funny. So funny. And it was just you have such a great sense of humor, and I was thrilled that you just let yourself kind of share that with us. It
Yeah,
was
well, a lot of fun to write. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to write, and it was fun to research. I went online and researched famous lines from film noir, and by the way, Raymond Chandler's The Little Sister has the best amount of famous one-liners um, spoken by Philip Marlowe, who is the detective that you will ever find. And so I just would highlight these and copy them and to remember that voice. So yeah, so I
fantastic.
highly recommend Raymond Chandler, The Long Goodbye, and The Little Sister, and also oh shoot, what's the last one? The Big Sleep. Big Sleep's awesome too. So that's my recommendation for the day.
Awesome. We're getting to the end of our time, and I wonder if you had one piece of advice to impart for other writers who are listening, or just little nuggets of things that are just really good to keep in mind as because it's hard. Being a writer is hard. And what can you share that's useful?
Okay, well, what I'm going to say it's like well worn, but just do it and send your work out. And when I first started sending my pieces out, there was an online group and they're no longer around, but it was called Writer's Relief. And they had, I would send them the piece, they would read it, and then they would give me a suggestions of 25 journals to send this to based on their knowledge of the journals and my work, that piece I had sent in. And that's how I came to send something to Cobalt. And so I would suggest looking for a resource like that because it really helped me because there's so many journals out there. You couldn't possibly, know them all. And then, no one has time to read every journal and decide whether or not their piece is going to work there. Other than that, I would say just just send your pieces out. Just know that everybody thinks their work is crap. Everybody does. I think probably John Cheever thought his stuff was bad. Like everybody does, and you are in great company. But your work most likely is not crap, and it would probably be helpful to another person to read that work, because then they can relate as well to whatever it is you've written about, that writer has written about. Um, and I also, writing can be a way to sort of figure things out. And like journaling, and I journal all the time. And I just, sometimes what I do is, and this is going to sound a little weird, but I close my eyes and type. And I don't look at the screen and I don't worry about punctuation. I don't worry about misspellings. I just type. And you would be amazed at what happens when you do that. It's pretty incredible. So, so there's that too. So yeah, I think that it's just so important just to start doing it, which is, I wished I had started sooner. But then again, I don't think I was ready. So, um, it's timing as well. But I think that everybody has a chance to put something out there that's important.
That's great. Any last words before I'm going to include some links to your stories in the body of the article, but any last words to people who are listening?
I would say please look at Hodgepodge Literature and Art. It's an awesome journal, and we're a collective, and we have created a community of writers, which is hard to find these days. We, with each writer that is included in our journal, they are now part of the family, and they are welcome to uh, participate in our launch of the journal, which is every 6 months, or they can become part of our biweekly meetings. And then there's it's a great sense of community. And I think it's important to belong to something like that because you would never meet these people otherwise. And it's very supportive and very relatable. So those are my words of advice.
Thank you so much, Wood Reed. Great to speak with you.
Thank you, Gail. It's been great to speak with you too.